This is Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland, and it's a great thrill to welcome to the programme James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preachers. How are you?
Good, Billy, thank you. Yes, 15th album, I'm nearly 56, I'm still here.
That's good, well done, we're both still doing it. Critical Thinking, as you say, is your 15th album and an incredible near 40-year career. The band had said that they had no kind of real definite plan for this record. You know, sometimes you would play together, other times there'd be a bit of guitar or a bit of lyric. How was the record actually made, James? How did it come about?
It's hard to describe because so many tracks had different MOs. Sometimes you start an album and you have a mission statement, or you have an MO, or you have some kind of concurrent kind of methodology or concept running through it. With this album, it didn't feel like that. I think the oldest song on the record, it was written about 3 years ago. Actually, one of the songs that I wrote myself, I'd started writing it way over 15 years ago. But take a song like Decline and Fall. That was me coming into the studio and just doing a vocal and an acoustic over a click track. And then Nick and Sean subsequently came in and played along to that riff demo. Then a song like Brushstrokes of Reunion is a bit more played together, a bit more off the floor. People Ruin Paintings is definitely a bit more played off the floor. And then you get stuff like Critical Thinking and Hiding in Plain Sight, where Nick came in and did a demo himself, and we all kept adding bits.
Yeah.
So it's every track has a different story. And that's quite strange for our albums, because our albums sometimes tend to bed into some kind of familiar rhythm.
Yourself and Nick and Sean have been recording together since Suicide Alley, your debut single way back in 1988, followed of course by Generation Terrorists, your debut album 4 years later. How would you describe the creative dynamic between the three of you? How has it developed over the years?
I think it has developed into something different sometimes. Sometimes we really just do revert to what we've always done. Nick gives me a lyric, and then I spend time with the lyric, and then I try and do my best to try and interpret what he's given me. And then sometimes I'll just say to Sean, can you just put a gloss on this? Can you finish this bit? Sometimes I spend weeks with the lyric, and I just go at it and just write it 10 times, and finally I get to the version I want. But that has changed over the years. Sometimes Nick will write a lyric and he'll decide that he wants to try and write the music to it. And then sometimes I'll write a lyric and I'll decide the same. There are 6 songs in this album where we both wrote completely independent of each other. So that's 6 songs off a 12-track album. The other 6 are done in the same way. So, yeah, it's developed. What I would say is that myself and Nick have started writing on our own a bit more, even though we still write together. Now we are waiting for Sean to do his Top of Heathen and come along and write his Rock the Casbah.
Yeah.
So I genuinely actually would love Sean to just go, right, now it's my turn and yours Rock the Casbah, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, as you say, you wrote 3 tracks, lyrically on the record, and you kind of divvied it up like that. And I've just kind of picked a random selection of my favourite tracks from the album, which we're going to play over the course of the interview. And the first one I'm going to play is Dear Stephen. And there's a great story behind this, because it dates back to when the Smiths played Cardiff University in 1984. And Nicky was too ill to attend the gig. And his mum wrote a letter to Morrissey and the band, and she actually got a reply. Tell us what happened.
Oh, well, Nick's mum, Renee Jones, she was an invertebrate postcard writer to lots of Nick's favourite bands, which is amazing, really. She'd write a postcard off to, I think, The Fall, kind of Whitesnake, Rush, kind of like the Smiths, obviously. And she would send a postcard to one of these venues. She would see that one of the band that Nick was currently listening to, she would see they were playing somewhere near, and she would send a postcard to the venue saying, "Dear Mr. Geddy Lee, my sons are massive fans of you. Could you please send a postcard back to this address, please? It would be most appreciated." And sometimes she'd get a result. And this was the time where she'd sent a postcard to the venue that the Smiths were playing, which you said is Cardiff. I can't quite remember that myself. And Nick was ill, so he couldn't go to the concert, and she knew he couldn't go to the concert. So I think within the postcard, perhaps she'd said, "My son is a massive fan of yours, Mr. Morrissey. Can you please send him back a postcard wishing him well, because he's not very well at the moment?" And subsequently, he received a postcard from Andy Rourke and Morrissey saying, "Get well soon." So got to about 2 years ago, I think, and perhaps a bit longer. Nick was going through some of the stuff in his parents' house because his father had passed away. So by then, both his parents had passed away, and he was going through lots of stuff in his parents' house, as people do at that point in their lives. And then he found this postcard that Morrissey had sent back. And he was just struck by the power of the postcard, this inanimate object he was struck by the power this postcard had over his emotions and his emotional recall. And it made him realize that kind of that object still had so much power over him. And that time still had so much power over him. And he kind of said that there's still a part of him that finds itself hard to remove itself from that time in the 80s when we were all listening to the Smiths and Fall and Echo and the Bunnymen. And the song is about that. It's about the power of that object, that the power to evoke so many memories and so many emotions that object had over him.
And I mean, the song says, "Dear Stephen, will you come back to us?" I mean, over the years, were you guys lucky enough to actually ever cross paths with any of the guys in the Smiths, Johnny Marr or Morrissey himself?
The last time I walked past Morrissey was I got to see a gig at the garage in Highbury. He was there seeing a band, I can't remember who. And myself and our producer, Dave Ehringer, we were leaving the venue. And as we were leaving the venue, there was somebody leant against the frame of the entrance of the venue. And as we went past this person, Dave Ehringer, our producer, and our dear friend, and he produced most of the tracks in this record, he said, "Who does that guy think he is, Morrissey or something?" And then as we walked away, the guy went, "I am Morrissey."
Yeah, yeah.
That was the last time I was in proximity to Morrissey. So that was in 1998, I think.
Let's hear the song now then, from the brand new album from the Manic Street Preachers called Critical Thinking. This is a great new track called Dear Stephen. This is Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland. You join me in conversation with James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preachers. We're talking about the new album, which is called Critical Thinking. And James, you know, you're obviously a big fan of music. You know, you're a record buyer, you're a concert goer. And collectively, you guys have said that, you know, so many records from the 1980s have unlocked emotions during the making of this record. And you list people like Public Image Limited and the Gang of Four and 10,000 Maniacs and Echo and the Bunnymen. And you said that all these people were teachers. What were you getting from them, you know, when you went into the studio this time?
I suppose the first thing I'll go to is Matt Johnson from the
Yeah.
I remember loving This Is the Day, which we subsequently did a cover of. I remember just reading an interview with him in The Enemy, and he was carrying around a copy of Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre in his pocket. So I went and bought that book, and I started trying to decode and understand what existentialism was. With Echo and the Bunnymen, they taught me so much. You know, I started delving into the Velvets because of them, because they talk about the Velvets. I started delving into Frank Sinatra a bit more because Ian McCulloch, you know, went on about Frank Sinatra quite a lot. Television, I wouldn't have discovered Marky Moon if it hadn't been for Will Sergeant Ian McCulloch going on about television so much. Morrissey, obviously, went and read plays like A Taste of Honey. You know, went and read quite a lot of Tony Marchant after, you know, listening to lots of early jam, you know, playwright Tony Marchant, Barry Keefe. You get the picture, you know, after the Clash, you know, after getting a London Calling, I had it on a cassette. I went and found out who Lorca was.
Yeah.
You know, and discovered Blood Wedding, which was a play in which I was studying at O-level drama as well. So you connect all these dots. You connect all the dots that are shown to you outside of school. You know, Lorca, Sinatra, Camus, all these things, Velvet Underground, all these things that, you know, the Spanish Civil War with the Clash, all these things that are not taught you in school. It's like reading around your subject outside of school. So they taught us everything. And they taught us about attitude. And they taught us about aesthetic. Something like, you know, Magazine was a band that I loved. I went and discovered a novel called Shot by Both Sides, which is the name of one of their famous singles by a Japanese author who I can't remember who the author is now. But the aesthetic of Magazine, where there was a punk energy there, but also it was slightly detailed and it was slightly prog. It made you realise that you could fuse things together.
And they also had John McGeoch.
John McGeoch is just, you know, him and Stuart Adamson are always up there for me as my greatest teachers of all time.
Yeah, because I was going to say that you were influenced by a few of Scotland's pioneering bands. We saw you recently on Everything Is Possible, the brand new Simple Minds documentary. And on your official website, I was looking at it yesterday, you list your top 5 Stuart Adamson guitar solos with both the Skids and Big Country. Why did they make such a mark on you?
I think the Skids, because they had that inception of punk energy, but there's a futurism there and there's a glamour there and there's a pretentiousness there. Everything you want, you know, blood, brain cells, aesthetic. glamour, glitter, everything. Richard Johnson's dance moves. I just remember just rewinding, like, kind of like bits of him on top of the pops over and over.
He's got to be the worst out-of-time dancer in the history of rock, but somehow it just works, doesn't it?
The best out-of-time dancer
Yeah,
ever.
and he's still doing it. I saw the band play recently, and he's still dancing on the off beat. I don't quite know what he's doing, but he loves it up there.
Well, him and Ian Curtis,
Yeah.
I met him at the Beautiful Days Festival when we were playing there, around about, must have been 3 years ago. I can't remember. It's the first time I'd met Richard Jobson, and I asked him so many things. I asked him about, did he remember the night that you recorded Albert Tatlock at the Marquee? The live version, the famous live version. I asked him about kind of Scared to Dance, the lyrics on the actual song Scared to Dance, Of One Skin, Into the Valley, all those songs, Masquerade. And then I saw him after 10 minutes, I could see his eyes were glazing over, and he's like, get me away from this nutter. But kind of, I think about what it was. Stewart's guitar playing obviously dragged me in the Skids.
Yeah.
Jobs' lyrics dragged you in. In fact, the whole band, the whole lineup of Skids was amazing. Russell was amazing, and the production by Mick Glossop was amazing. Everything was amazing. But I think subsequently, when Stewart went on to Big Country, you could just hear that his playing was so powerful and so lyrical. He wasn't just a rhythm player. There was details. There were solos everywhere, all the way through the song. And the way him and Bruce Watson played together, Bruce is forgotten sometimes it's forgotten in how important he is in the structure of what Big Country did. But the interplay between Stuart Adamson and Bruce Watson is second to none.
Yeah.
It's like Richard Lloyd and Tom Verlaine, but in a different way. It's absolutely stunning. So, between stuff like Orange Juice, The Associates, Big Country, Ultravox, if you would have picked one thread through my musical inspiration when I was young, it would have been Scotland. Despite the Pistols and the Clash and Badfinger and Gene Loves Overall, the main country which inspired us was Scotland. There was something about the way Scotland produced music in the post-punk era where they infused it with a bit of soul, and that white popped out soul started kind of entering into a lot of Scottish music. Scotland was the champion of the British music scene for 20 years, definitely.
Right, we're going to play another track from the album which is directly linked to that. From Critical Thinking, this is the Manic Street Preachers and a great song called Decline and Fall. This is Billy Sloan on BBC Radio Scotland. You join me with my special guest, James Dean Bradfield from the Manic Street Preachers. We're talking about the band's new album, which is their 15th record called Critical Thinking. And James, next year you're approaching the band's 40th anniversary because you formed in 1986. You all lived, close to one another in Blackwood in South Wales. You've been lifelong friends. Sean is your cousin. What were the real expectations back there? Was it a couple of records, a couple of gigs, or were you looking much further up the road than that?
I think we all had different ways of looking at it. I think Wire and Richie, Nick and Richie, I think they partly believed in, no, I think they mostly believed in what they said in terms of one album, explode, and leave a trail of kind of angel dust across the sky for everybody to see forever. I think they believed in that scorched earth attack of Never Mind the Bollocks by the Pistols, just make one album and just make it as perfect as possible and then disappear. But when it became obvious that we weren't going to be that band, we weren't the Pistols, then we went with plan B, which was my plan, which was to carry on as long as we could. I just wanted to be in a band forever. I'm still managing to do that. I think Sean loved the idea of, because Sean was deeply musical. Sean was playing in the Clennon Colliery Brass Band, which is like a miners brass band.
Yeah.
Played a bit with Gwent Jazz Youth Orchestra. So he had a musical education, and he was going to go to music college in Leeds. He was going to go to music university in Leeds. So I think Sean found it very easy to take the idea of a future in music in a serious way. So myself and Sean, I think we're a bit more. We were a bit more ordinary in our ambitions. We were like, we want to be in a band and we want to play and we want to do the best we can and we want to just kind of conquer the world by being the brilliant band we think we can be. Whereas Nick and Richie, they had an ideology and they had a doctrine and they wanted to make as big an impact as possible in that Sex Pistols-esque way. So I think they were two schools of thought, Nick and Richie and myself and Sean.
But, you know, the statistics of your success are quite staggering because you've had 4 decades of making great records and touring the world, you know, and your achievements are also very, very varied. You know, you've got high points, things like huge records like, you know, Everything Must Go in 1996 or This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours in 1998, which sold a staggering 5 million copies. You've also played in places like Cuba. You went there in 2001 and met up with President Fidel Castro. You've played Glastonbury, Tea in the Park, the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff. If I put you on the spot, what would be, you know, a couple of highlights to you personally over that incredible near 40-year period?
I think I'll pick 3. I think the first time we played in Club Cheetah in Tokyo, I was 23. I'd barely been to Barry Island, you know, by the time I was 23. I'd been here twice. I'd never been abroad. I'd never been on a plane. And the first time I did fly was actually to Edinburgh. That's the first time I ever flew to a gig there because we'd had to do something with the right company. Anyway, you get the picture. So the first time we flew to Japan and we went there, and it blew my mind. Nothing will ever really teach me how open your synapses, your sensory synapses can be opened by another culture and another country, and a different air and a different smell and a different language and a different rhythm to life. When I first got to Tokyo, I just couldn't believe it. I was walking around the days for 2 days. And then when we actually did the concert, it was just insane. It was feral. It was smelly. It was sweaty. It was a cauldron of utter noise. And it was amazing. So that will always stick in my head. The first time we played Glasgow Barrowlands was an important moment because we had watched that video of Big Country playing from Barrowlands so many times. I'd watched the Waterfront video from Simple Minds from the Barrowlands so many times. I'd read so many reviews of what the Barrowlands was and what the Barrowlands experience could be. So playing there for the first time was astounding for me. And then I think playing at the Millennium Stadium on the Millennium New Year's Eve was an amazing experience because we opened our own stadium in terms of with the stadium just being built.
Yeah.
And all our families and everybody from Wales, it felt like, was there just in that stadium on that night. So those 3 concerts stick out for me. Tokyo for the first time, Barrowlands for the first time, and Cardiff Millennium Stadium on Millennium New Year's Eve.
We're going to play another track from the album, and it's a recent single. In fact, I think I'm correct in saying it's the first time that the lead vocals on a single were taken by Nicky Wire, your bass player. So let's hear it now from Critical Thinking. This is the Manic Street Preachers and Hiding in Plain Sight. This is Billy Sloan talking to James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preachers of the band's great new album called Critical Thinking. And James, we're talking at midday on the 27th of January, and at the end of this week, Saturday the 1st of February, it's exactly 30 years since Richie James Edwards, your friend and fellow band member, disappeared. Is he a guy who's constantly in your thoughts?
No, not now, because I think down that route lies madness. I think, you know, if you approach the past all the time to try and find answers to things that went wrong, I think that would not have a good effect on you. Just in the same way, you know, not in the same way, but in a different way, I don't think about my mother every day. And that was a big event in my life when she passed away in 99. I think you do get distance from these events, but inevitably every week there are thunderous echoes of what Richie was and what he did and what he meant to our audience and to us. And every time we walk up the stairs here in the studio, there's a jacket in a frame that you wore in the You Love Us video. And every time you walk up the stairs, you see that jacket. And every time I walk into one of the rooms here where we store our guitars, I find one of his smashed Telecasters.
Yeah.
And then you see pictures all the time. And you get asked about him. And then sometimes, you know, I live in Cardiff and I drive up the valley to see my father all the time. Sometimes you'll drive past a pub and you'll remember being in that pub with him for some party or something. So it's impossible not to think of Richie at least, 2-3 times a week. But things you do try and get some distance from those memories sometimes because it can't be healthy to try and live in that past and try and correct things, you know.
How do you go over a loss like that? I mean, can you go over it? You know, when Richie comes into your thoughts, is there ever a moment when you think or even hope that he's still out there somewhere?
I tend not to answer those questions because I think they're impossible to answer. So I don't try to answer them. I don't believe in things like closure. You know, it's an American concept, which I have no idea really what it means because at the end, talking from a personal experience, I'll never get over my mother dying.
Yeah.
When we're quite early in her life. You don't close the book on that. You just deal with it in different ways. So I think we're always aware that we're a step behind Richie's family and it was harder for them. And I think that stopped you indulging yourself on things like that, I think. Stops me indulging myself on questions like that, I think, because it's much harder. There was somebody else in this picture that was much harder for, and that was his family.
His musical legacy, you know, continues in so many different ways, and it must have been a real thrill for you last April of 2024, when street artist Paul Shepherd painted a Manic Street Preacher's mural on the wall of your hometown in Blackwood, and he depicts all four of you as you looked away back in 1991. What was your reaction when you saw that? Because, you know, never mind the hit records, never mind the sellout gigs at the Millennium Stadium, you've got your own mural. That must be a big deal.
Yeah, it does, yeah. I'm glad he did it from a good picture, and I'm glad he did it from an era where kind of we were a four-piece. It would have felt wrong if it had been the three of us, and he obviously realised that. It felt like a real honour and a privilege, to be honest. It's as simple as that. I'm surprised nobody's defaced it yet. You know? Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Because you think you've grown up and you think you've become a different person sometimes, and you think that you've evolved. But then you realise you really are the product of the place you came from.
Yeah.
And you're product of the people that you came from. And nothing will ever change that. And nor should it. You know, embrace is the wrong word, but I'm glad I come from where I come from. It really took care of me, and it took care of us.
Last year, you played a co-headline tour with Suede, and we saw you at Edinburgh Castle on the 10th of July. You mentioned Barland earlier, and I should say to everyone that you're kicking off your next major UK tour with 2 gigs at Barland on the 11th and 12th of April. There's nothing like going into the Lion's Den. Normally, you would do a tour and maybe finish at the Barland, but you're going in there right from the start. It's arguably the greatest venue in the country. You talked about it earlier. But, I mean, can you put into words what it's like when you go from the dressing room and you go into that piece of darkness between the dressing room and the stage, and then you walk out into the lights in front of that crazy crowd?
It's corny, isn't it? Because you get told about, I was being told about Barrowlands in Sounds, Melody Maker and Enemy in 1988, 1987, when I was reading 1986, and then I got there, and you kind of felt as if you knew the place before you got there. And you get there and you go, okay, this is Barrowlands. It's, in terms of the decor, it's quite humble. And it's slightly scuffed, shall we say.
Yeah.
And then you begin to realise that's why it's good. It's about the ley lines. It's about how the people transform the place and how the place just transforms them. You know, the way the kind of floor goes up and down, the way you go back to the dressing room time after time after time after time. And you go around Britain and you see so many venues are dead, gone, knocked down, places overtaken by conglomerates, and just like with this just kind of like, you know, just really finicky kind of like systems put in by kind of like corporate entity at certain venues that you used to know, that used to be somewhere which is a bit more funky. You go back to Barrowlands and everything is the same. Everything. The skirting boards, the dodgy curtains backstage, the stars kind of coming off the walls and put back on with a bit of Pritt stick.
You know the David Bowie story about the stars? He was doing a sound check in 1997, the first time he played it solo, and he was halfway through the sound check singing a song, and a star fell down from the ceiling and landed at his feet, and they retrieved it and framed it for him and gave it to him, and apparently it was hanging up on the wall of his flat in Paris or someplace like that. But I mean, you're following in some incredible footsteps, you know, Bowie, U2, Simple Minds, The Clash, R.E.M., Arcade Fire. The list is absolutely endless, isn't it?
And too many you mentioned it, and it is that kind of like, it's like that Joe Strummer quote at the end of Westway to the World. He says, you know, if you got that chemistry, you don't mess with it. You just don't mess with it. He was talking about the end where Topper was at the band and Mick was at the band. And it's the same with Barrowlands. You go there and you play there and you go, oh, wow, it just works. And I think it would be one of those things, if we were ever in a time in the band where Barrowlands wasn't what it was anymore, we would probably know our time was up. You know, if that place went, then we should go too. It's an amazing place. When you get there, I never go back to the hotel after the sound check. I always stay in the dressing room and I just soak it in because I love it there. I absolutely love it. I love the walk up through the market, up the stairs. I love seeing a bit of the kind of Simple Minds road crew graffiti on the electric when they fixed the electric for the waterfront video. Yeah. You know, I love seeing that bit of that. The history of the place can be slightly gruesome, but, you know, kind of it's like a Bible John and all that. But no, it's like I said, we've been in a band for a long time. We've seen so many changes in every respect. And it's the only thing, the only place which has remained entirely the same, which is an achievement.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing you live at the Barland on the 11th and 12th of April, showcasing your brand new album called Critical Thinking. And thanks very much, because at the start of the interview you said you actually on occasions tune into the show on a Saturday night.
Yes, I do, yes. Like I said, that is the wonder of BBC Sound. It's the revolution in kind of like of anybody that just wants to, I used to tune into Vic's show, your show, and just show all over the country, shows all over the country, actually. And it's just like BBC Sound has been a revolution for old fellas like me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I'm really also glad that I've never said anything bad about you in recent years, or you'd be coming on and shouting and screaming down the line. James, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to have you in the programme. Once again, your brand new album is called Critical Thinking, and we'll play out with another one of my favourite tracks. This is the Manic Street Preachers and Brush Strokes of Reunion. Thanks, James.
Cheers, buddy, man.